let's move on to question number 2. From Alex, Curt has asserted confidently in the past that the universe is deterministic. He also praises Joshua Bach very highly, who has stated in the past that base level reality has no priors. The universe is tautology and can be described as a non-determinist Turing machine with the Kolmogorov complexity of 0. I am mostly interested in the disconnect when it comes to Bach's and Curt's belief on whether the universe is deterministic or not, and where Curt thinks this disconnect comes from, although his interpretation of the whole quotation would also be very interesting. Note, I'm aware that Curt is not a god, and if he hasn't studied theoretical computer science in great depths, it's perfectly understandable.
I would say that most of my work has its origin in a theoretical an understanding of theoretical computer science, which is why it's reducible to computability. I would say that it's hard. I love Joshua Bach because when he's talking, if I translate what he's saying, if I translate what he's saying, he's basically right. Just as our group, we try to take everything and turn it into a universally commensurable language that is subjectively testable as well as objectively testable. It's actionable in one way or another. Then Joshua tends not to do that. He tries to frame everything as computer science in the same way that mathematicians try to reduce everything to mathematics. So it's a little bit sometimes difficult to understand what he's saying. I understand this statement is concurrent with Wolfram's research, and that the universe evolved the rules it has because they're the only rules a universe can evolve. In other words, I don't believe in the multiple universes with multiple sets of variables. The universe is adversarially competitive at every level because it has to be for reasons that are rich, and I'm afraid that, given I've taken an allergy pill this morning, if I switch over to try and explain all that right away, I'll forget what I was talking about again. So it's more that there's no that the universe arises from no initial rule set, but instead a problem, which appears to be pressure, and that because everything results from pressure and friction. I mean, it's like heat. So what he's saying is that what it's going to do is something that it can itself calculate, but does not know at the beginning. In other words, there's no purpose to it. It's just going to calculate whatever's calculable at every temperature and pressure over and in every set of resource conditions, and that computation is unknowable. So when we say the problem with this way he's stating this as with what do you call it, with determinism, is there's a difference between hard determinism and soft determinism. Hard determinism would be that the outcome is of any processes are given at the beginning rather than discovered by trial, error, and complexity. And soft determinism is that we can by observations of the universe, develop rules of continuous application, which means that the universe does obey these laws. If it wasn't, the universe wasn't deterministic at some level, in other words, if for us about dropping a rock didn't fall down because of gravity, it would be impossible for sentient life to evolve because sentient life is predicated on the use of the neurological system to make predictions from which about the world based because of regularities. And if we couldn't do that, evolution couldn't function. In other words, life couldn't function. And even then, evolution couldn't function because no storage of information would be predictive of future value of that information. So I think it's partly he's using a set of terminology here that is, again, directly out of computer science, but it's out of computer science and physics and philosophy. And in that sense, he's not clarifying what he means by the Turing machine. In other words, there's a deterministic Turing machine should produce a determinable outcome, and it doesn't. Does this make sense? Somebody can, is that person on here?
I don't think so.
So I think I think I answered that question. And what it really is nothing more complicated than a misunderstanding of determinism as the scope of categorical consistency over time. See, let me think of anything else. Really, that's, I mean, for example, here's a great example in AI sense. That what is an ant's perception of the world, right? They're very small, things are very big. So what objects and spaces and borders are they aware of, and over what time period? Then you go to a dog. I mean, how long is a dog's memory, right? And it's a few minutes really, in the sense of maintaining context, but and even throwing things like the trick I used to try to teach my dogs was if I throw the toy over the house, right, into the back, from the front yard into the backyard, that they have to go into the backyard to get it. Now, this is fairly easy if the dog can hear it. It's easy if your house is on a plot where there's a side yard to go through. But in our house, we lived in what do you call it? A tradition, what do you call it? A courtyard house. So you can't get by on either side. You actually have to go through the front door, take a left, go out the courtyard this way, go down the side in the back toward the backyard, and then into the backyard and buy it and get whatever's back there. So this sequence seemed to be hard for the dogs to get. Well, it was a lot easier for my golden retriever than it was for our German short hair, which was kind of thick. So when you look at the world through these scales, you say, well, what's deterministic at what scale? For the reason our perception is somewhat limited sometimes is it's no use to us to perceive and predict a category that's inactionable to us. So that's what we didn't evolve to perceive categories at scale. So what's happened since the scientific revolution, and more importantly, what's happened since the 1800s, is our ability to perceive these categories at scale has become a necessity for it. Ergo, why we develop economics and what we think of as physics and biology, is that we're looking at things bigger than us and smaller than us, so we're not constrained like the ant and the dog are. So when you talk about determinism, there is a determinism available to the creature by evolutionary limits of utility, and there's, in other words, you can't evolve something that you can't learn, because you lack the ability to perceive it. So there's this problem of what we mean as determinism for humans is a scale problem. So what happened in the revolution of science is we started running into problems. Economics is the one I'm most familiar with. We started running into real problems of not understanding how the world works at scale. And this is why you still have the problem of the feminine versus the masculine, feminine in time, masculine over time, and why we have the problem in the voting structure of people who can perceive short-term or medium-term or long-term outcomes and vote accordingly. I suppose I should address Kolmogorov complexity, which is, I'll read the definition. The Kolmogorov complexity of a string is the length of the shortest possible program in a fixed programming language that can produce that string as an output. So the problem is, what's the length of the algorithm of the universe? There isn't any. There's just pressure. And so there's an existing condition. The algorithm of the universe is just how to release the pressure. What is that algorithm? Well, it's just what's available to it, right? There's no algorithm to it. This is the whole point. It is deterministic in the sense that all given temperature and pressure, you will evolve whatever rule set is necessary for the release of pressure, but there is no rule set to start with. Let's see if there's anything else here. Uncomputability. One of the critical properties of Kolmogorov complexity is it's uncomputable. This means there's no general algorithm that compute exact complexity of an arbitrary string. This is similar to what what's his name, Wolfram is saying, in that there are calculable and computable and uncomputable statements. In other words, assertions. Well, with Jesus Christ, I'm just realizing if I go through this, it's going to take me an hour to explain it in the detail that normies can understand it. But in essence, if there's no string, you have a complexity of 0. And so nothing can be computed. In other words, we can't tell ahead of time, and nothing can be calculated. We can't summarize into general rules. So we're left with basically evolution is the only way, by trial and error, to compute anything, because the only rule is basically survival by the release of pressure by either distribution into space or concentration into mass. Yeah, so I think I've answered that one about as thoroughly as I can. If anybody's a geeky enough to want to continue that discussion, add it to the questions, and I'll go into more detail. But I'm given that I've been as gentle as Francis is in his coaching of these discourses, that I've been told I need to shorten my lectures on these questions, so I'm going to keep it at that.
I think it's just that, I mean, I studied computer science back in college, and I have actually not heard of this term. So there's stuff here that I need to study up on. So Graciano stated, so Curt's determinism is based of inevitable outcome of statistical generalities versus mechanical determinism.
So the mechanical determinism would mean the categories that were emerged would be, yeah, it's the problem of rule. God, I don't know how to do this without. So yes, that's pretty close. How do you say it again? You read it again?
It's based, your determinism is based of inevitable outcomes of statistical generalities versus mechanical determinism.
I'd say those are what we can predict, but just determinism in the sense that the universe can evolve only one way, even if we don't know what that is until it happens.
Correct. So I'm not sure I'd answer the question because I'm not exact. I think Martin's correct. I don't know how to break it down further because I'm not sure which question. Can you repeat it one more time? I think I keep running away with it. Give me one more time.
So Curt's determinism, so it essentially boils down to whether your determinism is based off of inevitable outcomes of statistical generalities instead of a mechanical determinism.
Yeah, I don't know if I can answer that question without being misleading because I'm not sure I understand it. What I'm saying is that I agree with Bach, agrees with Wolfram. And the reason it's important that the three of us agree is, and it's not common in the physics community to agree with this, is because there's too much, that's not clear in the computer, is that there's too much disciplinary isolation between these systems of knowledge. And of course, Bach and I are also understand epistemology and neuroscience. And so when you're looking at these different factors, you say, well, I know that I'm right, that Bach is right, that Wolfram is right. And I think for me, Wolfram's contributed a couple of things, but the fact that the universe will evolve the rules it has, so it's not pre-designed and it's not fine-tuned for life. It's just these are the rules that any universe will resolve because there is no string. In other words, there is no set of rules to start with. And so the rules that survive are the only rules that can survive. And even if there were different pressures, we would see, as we see in the evolution of the universe so far, it appears that the rules remain the same either way. And that's what Wolfram's game of life with, which is what he's doing. He's writing his Ruley odds are essentially creating a game of life for the evolution of causality. So I mean, we're all saying, I'm trying to shut down and get myself down again. We're all saying the same thing. So when you say Curt's idea, it's not really my idea. It's really the idea that from what is the first premise upon which the universe enacts, and we're saying it's pressure, the evolutionary consequences of the release of pressure, which causes action, in other words, change in the states of the universe, and that the rules and the consequences it produces, they're not determinable given the variety of scales. Now, once we get to the point where we see something like chemistry, of course, then it becomes determinable. When we get down to something like below chemistry, like the formation of elements, right? Then that is determinable. But so we can find, but as complexity increases, determinability is only achieved through trial and error. It can't be known. This is what Wolfram's work on, beginning with Conway's Game of Life. It was his first insight with it. And it's not that dissimilar from the problem of Gödel numbering in logic or Chomsky's theory of language, is that what can be expressed in language isn't knowable because it's fucking infinite, right? And if you look at language, you look at mathematics as a language, and you look at the Rulliad system as a language, all those languages do is try to create sentences that survive. And the universe is just survives by the concentration of information, which a sentence is a concentration of information that persists longer than the external opportunities to not persist and compensate for. So I don't know. I don't know. I might have to have the person, Alex, listen to what I've just said there, if you can understand what I just said, and say, and say, well, and ask me a further question in a more precise language, because I can only describe the system at this level as an answer to a question when I'm not sure what the precision of the question is.